What if the person you thought you knew, the one with the authentic smile, the documented history, and the verifiable past simply wasn't real? For months, Agent Marcus Thorne and his specialized FBI cybercrimes unit were chasing what seemed like half a dozen separate, sophisticated criminal enterprises, arms deals in the Baltics, high-frequency stock manipulation in New York, and massive offshore money laundering operations spanning 3 continents. Each operation was completely isolated, run by a different phantom CEO with seemingly perfect credentials. Authentic passports, flawless credit scores, and even verifiable medical histories dating back decades. Thorne thought he was tracking 6 ghosts, a consortium of the world's most elusive white-collar criminals who had perfected the art of disappearing into plain sight. Then, buried deep within the encrypted metadata of a seemingly innocuous Swiss bank transfer, his chief analyst found it, a single, repeating digital watermark. It wasn't a logo or a threat. It was a declaration, a digital signature so subtle yet profound that it immediately shattered every piece of conventional crime logic the team held. Thorne later described the moment that chilling realization hit him. It was just 7 words, tucked away in the deepest part of the system, written in code that was almost poetic: "I am everyone." That's when the ground disappeared from beneath us. We weren't chasing 6 people. We were chasing one, and that one person was capable of existing everywhere. How could one individual successfully live as 10 different people simultaneously, maintaining entirely separate lives, separate bank accounts, and separate psychological profiles, all derived from the identities of the recently deceased? What you are about to discover may truly surprise you. We thought identity was a fixed concept, defined by a birth certificate and a social security number. But what if identity itself is the most dangerous weapon in the modern world? This wasn't about stealing money. The vast wealth generated by these phantom lives was merely fuel for a much larger engine. This hacker, codenamed Proteus, didn't want cash. They wanted the ultimate power. The ability to exist in any form, in any location, at any time. The FBI realized they weren't chasing a conventional criminal. They were pursuing a digital specter that seamlessly inserted itself into the gaps left by the dead, resurrecting their digital footprints with chilling, undeniable precision. The initial investigation focused on tracing the money, following traditional crime logic. But Proteus wasn't traditional. They left a trail designed not to be followed, but to be absorbed, forcing the agents to question everything they believed about reality and trust. Stay with me until the end, because the real nightmare began when Proteus stopped inhabiting strangers and started wearing the faces of those closest to the agents themselves. The cold dread that settled over the investigation wasn't about tracking stolen assets anymore. It was about the reflection in the mirror, the voice on the phone, the hand reaching across the breakfast table. Proteus had weaponized intimacy. Agents, trained to trust only verifiable data, found themselves suspended in a perpetual state of doubt. The worst part was the isolation. How could Agent Kinsley confide in his partner, Agent Miller, about the possibility that Kinsley's own wife might be a temporary vessel for the enemy, when Miller's own brother had just shown up unexpectedly after years of silence? The investigative room, once a hub of frenetic energy, became a silent arena of paranoia, where every casual glance was scrutinized and every friendly gesture was logged as potential deception. Before we dive deeper into how this crippling paranoia fractured the team, forcing them to adopt communication methods that bypassed human interaction altogether, let's pause and connect this feeling of fundamental doubt to our own lives. If this unsettling journey into the nature of trust and identity resonates with you, if you've ever had a moment where you questioned the very foundation of what you believed was real, I genuinely want to hear about it. Take a moment right now and leave a comment below. Share your own experience, your opinion on this kind of psychological warfare, or just how this story makes you feel. Your participation here, your voice in this discussion, is truly what makes this channel grow and allows us to reach more people who need to hear and analyze these complex narratives. If you appreciate the effort and depth we put into unraveling these threads, please hit that like button. It's a small gesture that signals to the platform that this content matters. And if you want to ensure you don't miss the next stage of this investigation, the moment the agents realized the mimicry wasn't just physical, but psychological, altering their very memories, make sure you subscribe to the channel, Supporting this community ensures we can continue to explore the shadows where truth and deception merge. Now, let's look closer at the true cost of this mimicry, because the Faces Proteus War were only the beginning. The real goal was to erase the agent's sense of self entirely. The FBI's initial foray into what they dubbed the Proteus anomaly wasn't triggered by a dramatic crime scene or a panicked informant. It began, as many profound disturbances do, with statistical noise, a flicker in the deep data streams monitored by the Financial Crimes Unit. They were chasing standard identity theft, the usual churn of stolen credit cards and fabricated SSNs. But the patterns they began isolating defied conventional criminal logic. These weren't the sloppy digital fingerprints of petty thieves trying to maximize quick cash. These were pristine, integrated digital footprints, appearing suddenly yet completely formed in the labyrinthine corridors of the national banking system and the vast data repositories of the federal bureaucracy. Agents scanning the transaction logs started noticing something fundamentally disturbing. Individuals who were officially listed in the National Death Index, complete with verified death certificates and burial records, were suddenly engaging in the full spectrum of modern civil life. A woman, confirmed dead by drowning in 2018, opened a checking account in Phoenix with a substantial initial deposit. A man, deceased in a traffic accident in 2015, filed a complex Schedule C tax declaration in Seattle, reporting genuine, verifiable income derived from a newly registered consultancy firm. The sheer volume was manageable at first, a few dozen cases scattered across the continental United States, but the quality of the resurrection was what caused the internal alarm bells to ring with unnerving consistency. Every piece of documentation was impeccable. Bank verification systems accepted the IDs without flagging them, recognizing legitimate driver's licenses and established credit scores. Medical records showed continuous, plausible histories, complete with insurance claims and copays for recent consultations. When the agents pulled travel manifests, these reanimated citizens were flying commercially, passing TSA scrutiny at major hubs, and staying in legitimate high-traffic hotels. There was no trace of digital forgery, no telltale signs of manipulated metadata, nothing that suggested sophisticated subterfuge operating outside the system. These identities were functioning within the system, perfectly integrated, like a phantom limb that had somehow been restored to full, terrifying utility. The uncanny precision of the data defied all known criminal methodologies. The investigative teams, steeped in the gritty reality of urban tension and financial deceit, quickly realized they weren't dealing with simple fraud. Fraud implies a flaw, an exploit of a weakness that generates sloppy evidence. This was different. This required a level of meticulous operational security and psychological patience that transcended organized crime. It was a sustained, high-fidelity performance across multiple critical sectors of American bureaucracy. The psychological impact on the agents was immediate. The rules of the game had changed, and the bedrock of verifiable reality felt unstable. Agent Holloway, reviewing the case of a retired teacher who had supposedly died of a heart attack but was now traveling regularly between Miami and Dallas, meticulously declaring state taxes in both locations, articulated the chilling conclusion. This isn't just ID theft. We track ID theft. This is engineered existence. They aren't stealing identities. They are restoring them. They are putting people back into the machine, flawlessly. The implication was profound. Someone or some entity had the resources not merely to fake a life, but to perfectly simulate the administrative and psychological weight of a real one, complete with verifiable history and plausible future intent. The traditional methods of investigation, following the money, tracing the digital trail, were useless when the trail itself was flawlessly legitimate. The sheer organizational discipline required for this operation hinted at a deeper, more disturbing agenda, one that used the dead as mere props in a silent, creeping invasion of consensus reality. This was less a financial crime and more a profound act of social and structural infiltration. The question shifted violently from, how did they fake the records, to what is the structural objective of bringing back the dead? This operation required not just access to death certificates, but intimate knowledge of the deceased's life history, social network, and even their psychological profile to maintain the illusion flawlessly under intense scrutiny. The FBI was suddenly staring into an abyss where death was merely a bureaucratic inconvenience, easily overridden by superior operational capability. This chilling psychological experiment targeted the very fabric of societal trust. If the dead could walk among us undetected, flawlessly blending into the noise of the city, then the next step was clearly to understand what these resurrected shadows were doing, and who among the living they were now replacing. The investigation quickly pivoted from analyzing simple identity theft to dissecting a surgical, systemic subversion. The sheer scale of the operation revealed that the architect behind it was not interested in liquidating bank accounts or stealing credit card numbers. The true commodity being harvested here was far more profound: existence itself. This individual, whom the team began informally referring to as the archivist, was not merely constructing false profiles. They were engineering complete, traceable, and historically validated lives. When the archivist deleted a deceased person's digital footprint and simultaneously inserted a new, fabricated history into the digital ledger of the world, they weren't committing fraud. They were performing a digital resurrection, making the dead walk again with a clean slate provided by the highest levels of institutional trust. The level of detail was staggering, pushing the boundaries of forensic investigation into the realm of forensic psychology. Every resurrected identity came pre-equipped with a robust medical history, including plausible, non-fatal ailments and routine physical checkups. There were records of specialized consultations, detailed dental charts, and even recent, seemingly legitimate laboratory results, all time-stamped and linked to real, though compromised, clinics. These weren't static images. They were entries within the primary databases of major healthcare providers. To the casual auditor or even a deep background check, the identity was impeccable, displaying the normal human vulnerability required for authenticity. This meticulous attention to the organic flaws of a human life was perhaps the most chilling aspect of the operation, a masterful manipulation designed to bypass the psychological filters of suspicion. Furthermore, the archivist ensured that every fake life had anchors in the concrete world, minimizing the urban tension that sudden, untraceable movement might cause. Each identity possessed verifiable employment records, complete with W-2s and quarterly tax filings, suggesting steady, if unremarkable, careers. Addresses weren't just P.O. boxes. They were linked to actual residential leases or property deeds, often utilizing short-term rentals that had been vacated but whose records remained digitally active and accessible. The paper trail, or rather the digital trail, was flawless, reflecting years of mundane, predictable citizenship. The team realized they weren't hunting a ghost in the machine. They were hunting an entire, functionally independent operating system installed parallel to reality. This meticulous construction proved that the goal was not immediate monetary gain. If the archivist had wanted quick cash, they would have traded volume for detail. Instead, these identities were long-term assets, designed for deep infiltration and sustained operation. Each perfectly constructed life was a piece on a vast, unseen chessboard, positioned for future moves in a complex criminal network that utilized these flawless shells as conduits for transactions, intelligence gathering, or, most frighteningly, political maneuvering. The identities were expendable, yet perfectly renewable. The true crime wasn't the theft of the identity, but the theft of the institutional mechanisms that validate human existence, the systematic dismantling of societal safeguards against profound deception. The investigation shifted to tracking the first tangible manifestation of this psychological warfare. If the archivist was stealing existences, they were doing so to facilitate something concrete. The question was no longer how they built the identities, but where they deployed them, and for what ultimate, terrifying purpose. The team honed in on a cluster of recently activated identities, focusing specifically on those that had begun interacting with secure government infrastructures, a sign that the game had moved from preparation to execution, signaling a critical escalation in the mystery they were struggling to unravel. The operational focus shifted immediately from monitoring the output of the phantom accounts to dissecting the data residue they left behind. The intrusion wasn't loud or disruptive. It was surgical, designed to mimic the background noise of legitimate administrative activity within high-security governmental portals. Analysts were forced to dive into the lowest-level metadata, the fleeting logs and audit trails generated by automated system processes, the digital detritus usually ignored by human review. This is where the investigation encountered its first true deviation from standard criminal methodology. It was not a straightforward alert indicating a firewall compromise or a known malware signature. Instead, the abnormality was a bizarre consistency, a subtle mathematical echo discovered buried within the redundancy checks of entirely disparate systems. Databases governing financial flow, logistical supply chains, and even regional energy grid management, all siloed and unconnected by design, carried the same invisible imprint. The analysts initially dismissed it as a systemic flaw, a shared vulnerability in the infrastructure's foundational coding. But as the pattern repeated across dozens of compromised points, the truth became unavoidable. This was a deliberate mark. They described it as finding the same infinitesimal scratch mark pressed into the ceramic casing of 3 different, securely locked vaults. When the team isolated the anomaly, they found that it manifested as fragmented code, deliberately broken apart and distributed. These fragments were not executable commands. They were information sequences embedded deep within the architecture, often occupying fields designated for system notes, debugging logs, or checksum validation, areas rarely scrutinized by conventional security sweeps. The process of mapping and reassembling these scattered pieces was painstaking, relying on advanced pattern recognition algorithms that treated the code not as data, but as a language. After 72 continuous hours of mapping, the sequence coalesced into a chilling declaration, a textual whisper hidden within the binary noise. "I am everyone." This was the signature. It wasn't visible on the surface. It was a ghost in the machine, a digital echo ensuring that every system breach, regardless of its target or method, carried the calling card of a single author. The psychological impact of the discovery was immediate and profound. It wasn't a boast of technical prowess, but a declaration of omnipresence. The entity they were pursuing was not merely hacking systems. It was weaving itself into the very fabric of secure data, asserting control over the digital infrastructure that maintained the precarious balance of the urban environment. The realization struck the command center with the force of a physical blow. This digital whisper was the consistent, complex mark of a singular, highly sophisticated author. This perpetrator operated outside the established paradigms of collaborative cybercrime or state-sponsored espionage. The level of operational security, the sheer patience required to leave an identical, fragmented mark across unrelated governmental architectures, cemented the fact that they were facing an adversary whose grasp of complexity defied conventional profiling. The investigation shifted instantly from tracking phantom identities to hunting a ghost capable of operating unseen within critical infrastructure. The inherent urban tension, the knowledge that this entity was potentially controlling essential services from the shadows, became the driving force of the operation. The immediate priority became tracking the common vectors used to deploy this signature. If the mark was consistent, the delivery mechanism must also be. Analysis focused on the brief, transient network connections, data packets that existed for milliseconds before dissolving, that served as the conduit for the fragmented code. These ephemeral links began to point toward a specific network topology, one that suggested the perpetrator was not initiating attacks from a distant, remote location, but was operating locally, physically integrated into the dense, chaotic network infrastructure of the metropolitan area itself. The hunt for a digital ghost now required mapping the physical city grid, searching for a single, hidden nerve center that served as the point of origin for the distributed signature. They needed to find the quiet, unassuming location where the identity of everyone was being meticulously constructed and deployed. The digital search for the physical nerve center had reached a stalemate, drowning the agents in a flood of irrelevant geodata. When the attack shifted from external to internal, the vast, anonymous network signature suddenly condensed, focusing its terrifying precision on the team itself. It was no longer a matter of mapping the city's vulnerable infrastructure. The threat had breached the personal perimeter. The hacker, previously a distant, calculating entity, began a campaign of psychological warfare designed not to extract funds, but to instill profound, crippling dread. The initial signs were subtle, easily dismissed as system glitches or routine data drift. A forgotten, seldom used bank account belonging to Agent Miller's estranged father registered a deposit of exactly 1 cent, immediately withdrawn. A secure internal message sent by Agent Hayes to his team leader contained a single, misspelled word, a typo that precisely matched the way Hayes's deceased grandmother used to misspell that particular word in handwritten notes. These were not random errors. They were meticulously placed breadcrumbs leading directly into their private histories, designed to demonstrate intimate knowledge. The chilling implication was immediate. The attacker wasn't merely monitoring their communications. They had access to the deep, archived layers of their personal lives. The investigation transformed instantly from a technical hunt into an unnerving psychological exercise. This wasn't about ransomware or corporate espionage. It was about cognitive subjugation. The hacker sought the ultimate power, the ability to masquerade as the most trusted figures in their lives. Profiles began appearing on obscure, encrypted platforms, digital doppelgangers of people the agents knew intimately. A photograph of a colleague's child, taken years ago and never shared digitally, materialized as the avatar for a newly created user handle that mirrored the name of their neighborhood street. The urban tension of the hunt, previously focused outward on the sprawling city, coiled inward, infecting the very air of the secure operational facility. Every colleague, every delivery person, every maintenance worker suddenly became a potential vessel for the enemy's gaze. The hacker was testing the boundaries of their belief, proving that digital identity was mutable, fragile, and easily weaponized. The small, calculated incursions escalated rapidly. A deepfake voice message, synthesized perfectly to replicate the voice of a key witness they were protecting, was routed directly to the secure line, delivering a nonsensical, rambling threat. The message was irrelevant, but the mimicry, the depth of the audio surveillance required, was a masterstroke of menace. The team realized the motive was pure control. Money was secondary. The primary goal was the destabilization of their reality. If the enemy could walk in the shoes of their loved ones, they could dismantle the investigation from the inside out, leveraging emotional vulnerabilities as though they were zero-day exploits. The proximity of the attacks suggested a physical closeness that was profoundly unsettling. If the hacker had this level of personal detail, the physical nerve center they were searching for could not be miles away in some anonymous server farm. It had to be interwoven with the fabric of their immediate environment, hiding in plain sight, leveraging the mundane anonymity of the metropolis to mask its true, insidious nature. The search for the origin point now carried an unbearable weight of paranoia, forcing them to look not just at the grid, but into the faces surrounding them. Right below, "I'm on this journey too," the specialized forensic accountants, cloistered away in the subterranean bunker, initially reported confusion rather than concrete leads. The expected patterns of digital larceny, large, immediate transfers to offshore accounts or rapid liquidation of assets, were conspicuously absent. The financial data, usually a clear roadmap of criminal intent, was instead a sprawling, contradictory mess. Accounts were accessed, high-level credentials stolen, and organizational structures compromised. Yet the balance sheets remained largely intact. They were not dealing with a thief interested in accumulating fortune. They were facing a saboteur whose currency was purely informational. This lack of conventional profit motive introduced a devastating new layer of complexity to the investigation. The behavioral analysis unit quickly pivoted. If the motivation wasn't greed, it had to be something far more esoteric, something anchored deep in the psychological realm. They began to look at the sheer volume of appropriated identities, not just how many were taken, but how they were subsequently used. The hacker wasn't merely stealing digital passports. He was wearing them. He used a stolen CEO identity to order a pizza in a different state, an accountant's credentials to comment on a minor municipal zoning issue, and a security guard's login to request a library book on astrophysics. These were not preparatory steps for a major heist. They were small, unsettling performances, scattered acts of digital colonization designed purely to establish a footprint, a verifiable existence within the data stream. This realization brought with it a suffocating sense of urban tension. The threat was no longer localized to the network firewall. It was decentralized, existing simultaneously in the mundane background noise of everyday life. The hacker's method was a radical, criminal form of identity experimentation. He wasn't interested in the power granted by any single identity, but the power inherent in possessing multiple contradictory selves. He was testing the limits of digital reality. If he could convincingly file taxes, respond to emails, and execute minor transactions under a stolen name. Wasn't that stolen name, for all practical purposes, him? The analysts struggled to articulate the terror of this new profile. It was the phantom menace of ubiquity. He moved through the systems like a ghost in the machine, leaving no material trace, only the chilling impression of his presence in places he had no right to be. His existence was defined by contradiction and multiplicity. He was the person who signed the contract, the person who rejected the delivery, and the person who reviewed the performance, all within the span of an hour using 3 distinct, legitimate identities. The true terror was the understanding of his philosophical endgame, the ultimate objective that drove this relentless, pervasive campaign of identity theft. It became clear that the objective was not external validation or financial reward, but the profound, unsettling realization of a theoretical maximum: total digital saturation. The hacker was striving to dissolve the boundaries of the self, pushing the limits of what a single consciousness could manifest across a global network. They were witnessing a profound, dangerous declaration on the nature of personhood in the connected world. A terrifying hypothesis played out in real time across the lives of thousands. The underlying, cold motivation was terrifyingly simple, yet devastatingly complex. He was driven by the desire to prove that identity was merely a function of data input, culminating in the silent, pervasive creed that now echoed through the secured investigation rooms. If I can be anyone, then I can be everyone. This was the moment the FBI understood they weren't chasing a criminal. They were tracking a phenomenon, a contagion of the self, spreading silently into the deepest recesses of the digital and physical infrastructure, transforming the city into a vast, open-air laboratory for his ultimate, chilling experiment. The question was no longer where he was, but who he was being right now, and how many more faces he intended to wear before the light began to fade. Right below, "I'm on this journey too." The question was no longer where he was, but who he was being right now, and how many more faces he intended to wear before the light began to fade. The specialized task force, sequestered in a secure, subterranean facility meant to be an impenetrable bastion against the noise of the surrounding urban tension, felt the first tremors of the counterattack not as a digital intrusion, but as a systemic violation of their mental fortitude. The pursuit, which had begun as a methodical investigation, curdled into a relentless psychological gauntlet. Agent Miller, monitoring the primary tracking array, watched his terminal flicker, not with the chaos of a denial-of-service attack, but with an unnerving, deliberate reorganization. All active windows snapped shut simultaneously. The screen didn't display an error code. Instead, the system rebooted, bypassing the standard security protocols, and materialized a single, high-resolution photograph. It was a grainy, unsettling image of a woman who had died 5 years prior in a cold case completely unrelated to the current operation. A spectral presence pulled from the deepest recesses of the archive. Below the photograph, a short, chilling text string was displayed in white monospace font. "You are late." This pattern of digital haunting spread with terrifying efficiency across the operational floor. Agents' personal desktops, supposedly shielded and air-gapped from the immediate network, began displaying similar macabre galleries. These were not random selections. They were carefully curated photos of victims connected, often tangentially, to minor failures and bureaucratic dead ends the agents themselves had filed away years ago. The hacker wasn't merely breaching their security. He was mining their professional subconscious, weaponizing buried guilt and the inherent failures of their complex judicial machinery. The atmosphere, already thick with the anxiety of the hunt, became saturated with a personalized strain of paranoia. The tension escalated when Agent Reyes received an SMS notification on a secure burner phone, a device linked to an identity officially designated as deceased within the government registry. The notification was a standard confirmation code for a 2-factor authentication login, associated with a bank account that should, by all legal metrics, be inert. This was more than technical mastery. It was an administrative resurrection of the dead, an act designed to inject pure, debilitating confusion into the investigative process. It suggested the hacker possessed a level of access that transcended mere network penetration, extending into the very infrastructure of civic identity. The realization settled over the command center with the weight of cold steel. Every attempt the FBI made to establish a digital perimeter, Every protocol deployed to corner the target was anticipated. The adversary was operating several crucial steps ahead, using their standard operating procedures as predictable cues in a complex, high-stakes game of manipulation. He wasn't reacting to their movements. He was establishing the rules of engagement, forcing the investigators into the role of puppets, dancing to the rhythm of his digital orchestration. The feeling of surveillance had been terrifyingly reversed. The hunters realized they were the ones being observed, analyzed, and systematically dismantled from the inside out. The anonymity of the pursuit was gone, replaced by an unnerving, tailored intimacy. The hacker's control was absolute not just over the data streams, but over the psychological stability of the people chasing him. He proved that the greatest vulnerability wasn't a firewall, but the human mind burdened by history and doubt. His next move wouldn't be subtle. It would be a direct, public demonstration of his absolute command over the city's nervous system, forcing the investigation out of the shadows and into the blinding glare of immediate, overwhelming consequence. Right below, "I'm on this journey too." The collective focus had fractured, splintered by the sheer volume of noise the hacker generated. While the primary analytical teams chased ghost servers and manipulated IP relays across the globe, Agent K, relegated to archiving the deep history of discarded pseudonyms, found himself immersed in the digital debris, the artifacts of identities that were meant to be forgotten. It was a task of exhausting monotony, parsing thousands of hours of synthesized chat logs and abandoned social media profiles, searching for a ghost in the machine's linguistic patterns. The breakthrough, when it arrived, was not a flash of insight but a slow, creeping realization of an ingrained behavioral tick. Kay was not looking for technical signatures. He was hunting for the involuntary signature of the man behind the curtain. Across 3 separate, long-dormant aliases, each designed to represent wildly different demographics and psychological profiles, Kay noticed an identical, highly specific form of punctuation and syntax used only during moments when the persona was expressing self-doubt or minimizing personal risk. It was a subtle, almost archaic use of the M- followed by a specific clause structure, a habit so deeply rooted it transcended the conscious effort of synthetic identity construction. This wasn't code. It was a compulsion, a linguistic fingerprint accidentally left in the digital sediment. This psychological anomaly provided the first reliable anchor point in the entire investigation, a crack in the meticulously crafted facade. By correlating the timestamps of these unique verbal deflections with public Wi-Fi access logs, a secondary layer of metadata previously dismissed as irrelevant noise, Kay narrowed the potential physical location down to a tight, 3-block radius in the city's abandoned industrial sector. This zone was a graveyard of obsolete infrastructure, characterized by derelict warehouses and decaying factories, an area saturated with the palpable urban tension of forgotten spaces. The coordinates eventually pointed to a specific location, the subterranean levels beneath the former Zenith steel mill. Satellite imagery confirmed the presence of recent, though expertly concealed, excavation and ventilation work near a capped-off utility entrance, the perfect profile for a clandestine server farm or a self-contained operational bunker. The air immediately thickened with mystery. Why would a hacker of this caliber, one who had proven his ability to operate globally without leaving a trace, leave such a pedestrian behavioral breadcrumb? The possibility that this was the real location was immediately undercut by the terrifying possibility that it was an elaborate psychological trap, a lure designed to draw the investigative team into a confined space where the hacker held every tactical advantage. The debate in the command center was brief and fraught with the tension of imminent failure. To ignore the lead was to invite the impending public demonstration the hacker had promised. To pursue it was to walk willingly into a high-stakes ambush. The decision hinged on the nature of the flaw itself. If the hacker's greatest vulnerability was, as he himself demonstrated, the human element, then this subtle linguistic compulsion might be the one thing he couldn't completely excise from his digital creations. It was a moment of profound uncertainty, forcing the agents to confront the ambiguity of the evidence. They prepared to mobilize, moving from the sterile, brightly lit confines of the data center toward the shadows of the industrial decay, knowing they were potentially heading toward either the source of the chaos or the epicenter of a calculated detonation. The silent journey began, the heavy vehicles cutting through the city's strained nocturnal silence, heading toward a facility that might be empty, secure, or rigged to collapse the moment they breached the perimeter. Right below, I'm on this journey too. The silent journey culminated not in a blaze of tactical superiority, but in the stale, echoing silence of an abandoned industrial park. The heavy vehicles halted, their engines idling, casting long, distorted shadows across the chain-link perimeter fence. This place, rumored to be the nerve center of the global intrusion, offered no resistance. The anticipated ambush, the elaborate countermeasures, none materialized. There was only the low, continuous hum of the city's distant arteries, a soundtrack to mounting dread. The tactical unit moved with precision, an orchestrated ballet of Kevlar and suppressed fire. They breached the facility's main access point, expecting immediate confrontation, but found only the cold, dry air of a meticulously maintained, yet utterly vacant structure. The facility was designed for high-density computing, not comfort. The deeper they pressed into the building, navigating the labyrinthine corridors lined with inert piping and ventilation shafts, the heavier the atmosphere became, saturated with a palpable sense of having arrived too late. This was not a hideout, it was a stage recently vacated. The primary objective, the massive server farm located 3 levels below ground, was secured without a single shot fired. The irony was corrosive. They had tracked a digital phantom across continents, only to corner him in an empty room. The steel door, reinforced against conventional explosives, yielded to the specialized thermic lance, peeling back to reveal the core operation. The server room was immaculate, rows upon rows of racks standing sentinel. The cooling systems roared, maintaining an Arctic environment, but the crucial energy source was missing. The power indicator lights were universally dark. The lead technician, Agent Ramirez, stepped inside, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, seeking any sign of residual data. What they found was not a crash, nor a physical wipe, but an instantaneous, synchronized shutdown. It was a digital suicide note executed with inhuman timing, triggered the precise moment the exterior perimeter was breached. The network had achieved zero-state milliseconds before human intrusion. Ramirez moved toward the central console, a desk where the perpetrator must have sat mere moments before. The main monitor inexplicably flickered to life. It bypassed the standard boot sequence and displayed a single, unforgiving screen. There was no operating system interface, no login prompt, just stark white courier font against a field of absolute black. This anomaly was the final act of psychological warfare. The message, delivered not through encryption or complex code, but with devastating simplicity, hung in the sterile air. You don't need to find me. I'm already you. The silence that followed was not merely the absence of sound. It was the sound of an entire operation collapsing under the weight of utter failure. The statement negated the physical pursuit entirely. It redefined the adversary from a singular individual hidden in the shadows of the dark web to a decentralized, self-propagating entity. The paranoia was instantaneous and viral, spreading through the ranks. If the target was no longer tied to the location, the resources, or the identity they had meticulously uncovered, then where did the pursuit begin now? The implication was severe. The infiltration was complete. The escape was not physical. It was conceptual. The man who was everyone had simply dissolved into the collective stream, ready to emerge through any screen, any connection, perhaps even the very one you are using now. The investigation had hit a dead end, but the chase had just entered its most terrifying phase, the pursuit of an idea. The empty servers, the cold metal, the chilling final message. It all pointed toward a future where the enemy was indistinguishable from the crowd, lurking in the benign hum of everyday life, waiting for the next moment to strike. The facility was secured, but the perimeter of the mind had been permanently compromised. Right below, I'm on this journey too. I'm on this journey too. That realization that the threat isn't a physical structure but a vulnerability within our own perception changes everything about how we approach security, both digital and psychological. The physical perimeter might be secured, but the true battleground is the space between thought and action. It's a heavy note to end on, I know, but understanding the depth of the challenge is the first step toward building genuine resilience. We've managed to trace the ghost in the machine, following the cold echo of that final, chilling message, but now we have to figure out how to live with the knowledge that the ghost might just be a reflection of ourselves, waiting for the right moment to activate within the benign hum of our everyday lives. The investigation is officially closed, yet the pursuit of the idea has just begun. If you've stayed with me through this entire complex investigation, tracing the echoes in the cold metal and dissecting the implications of that profound, unsettling conclusion, then you clearly appreciate content that doesn't just skim the surface. This is exactly the kind of deep dive we commit to here, seeking not just answers, but better questions about the world we inhabit and the forces that shape it. If this analysis gave you a new perspective or offered a framework for thinking about the invisible threats surrounding us, consider making this channel a regular stop. Subscribing isn't just about clicking a button. It's about ensuring you don't miss the next critical piece of the puzzle we uncover together. The utility is in the continuous, deeper understanding we build. And since we've shared this intense journey, navigating the dark corners of the network and confronting the philosophical cliffhangers together, if this connection resonated with you and this exploration felt worthwhile, go ahead and give the video a like. It's the easiest, most direct way to let me know that this kind of detailed, nuanced content is valuable to you. Now, for those of you who truly went the distance, who made it past the dead ends and the complexity right here to the very end, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and just type, "I'm on this journey too." That's our secret signal. It tells me exactly who is committed to understanding these deeper layers of reality and who is ready for the next level of insight. Speaking of continuing the journey, the exploration doesn't stop here. We've established the what and the why of this particular breach and the nature of the enemy idea, but the next step is understanding the specific defense mechanisms that are failing and how we can adapt our strategies against non-physical threats. There's a video right here on the side that perfectly complements this entire discussion, detailing the emerging architecture of digital defense against these abstract threats. Click and continue with me by clicking that video. Let's keep the momentum going. I'll see you there.